I can smell cannabis, the 4 words. You're sitting in your car or you're walking down the street and a police officer steps up to you and says 4 words. I can smell cannabis. And in that moment, whatever happens in the next 30 seconds, you are going to do one of two things. You're either going to protect yourself, calmly, legally, without giving anything away. Or you're going to hand that officer a search and maybe a whole lot more that they may not actually have been entitled to take. Most people in that moment do the wrong thing. They panic, they start explaining themselves, they get angry and start arguing. Or, and this is the most common of all, they just sort of shrug and let it happen because they assume that once an officer says the magic word cannabis, they've got no choice. And here is the single most important thing I can tell you today. The thing that almost nobody knows. A smell on its own is not the truth. A smell alone isn't enough. Supposed to be enough. Not according to me, according to the police's own rules. So stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll know exactly what the law really says and the calm words to use the moment you hear, I can smell cannabis. I'm Oliver Bennett. I'm a criminal defense solicitor here in England and Wales. 15 years of standing next to people at the worst moments of their lives. And I can tell you that the smell of cannabis stop is one of the most common encounters there is and one of the most misunderstood. People have handed away their rights and sometimes their liberty over it simply because nobody ever told them the truth. So, let me be the one who does. Let me make this real with a scene because it happens exactly like this. Picture a quote. How people get it wrong. The Danny mistake. Young man, call him Danny, driving home in the evening. He's done nothing wrong. He's pulled over for something minor, a brake light. And the officer comes to the window, leans in and says, I can smell cannabis in the car. Now, maybe there's a smell, maybe there isn't. Maybe it's the bloke Danny gave a lift to an hour ago. Maybe it's the air freshener. Maybe it's nothing. But Danny panics. He starts babbling. No, I don't smoke. Well, my mate does, but not in here, I swear. And in 30 seconds of nervous talking, Danny has done the officer's whole job for him. He's confirmed cannabis is a sin in his world, he's made himself look guilty, and he's about to be turned out onto the pavement and searched in front of everyone on the strength of a sniff. Danny didn't do anything illegal, but he handed away every advantage he had because nobody ever told him that the smell on its own was the weakest card in the officer's hand, not the strongest. This video is so you're never Danny. Let's start with what this actually is, because you need to understand the power before you can understand its limits. The police do have a power to search you for drugs. It comes from something called Section 23 of the Misuse of Drugs, the Power, S.23, Misuse of Drugs Act. And like the everyday search power, it works on one thing: reasonable grounds to suspect that you're in possession of a controlled drug. Reasonable grounds. We come back to those two words again and again on this channel because they are the hinge that reasonable grounds and what they can't be, everything turns on. The officer has to have a real objective reason to suspect you specifically are carrying drugs. And exactly as with any search, that reason cannot be based on your race, your age, the way you're dressed, or the fact that you happen to be somewhere they consider dodgy. It has to be something real. So the whole question becomes, is I can smell cannabis on its own a good enough reason? And this is where it gets genuinely surprising, because the answer, according to the police's own national guidance, is no. Let me say that again slowly, because it is the heart of this whole video, and it is the thing they are banking on you not knowing. The College of Policing, which sets the professional standards that officers are trained to, its guidance is clear that the smell of cannabis, the police's own rule, smell alone isn't grounds. Cannabis alone is not enough on its own to give reasonable grounds for a search. It is, in their words, not good practice for an officer to base a search on any single factor in isolation. And that includes smell. This isn't some fringe legal theory of mine. The Metropolitan Police have had it in their own policy since 2013 that the smell of cannabis alone is insufficient. The police watchdog back in 2022 recommended the same thing. An independent scrutiny panel said it again in 2024. Some forces have gone as far as formally training their officers that the smell of cannabis is not by itself a justifiable reason to stop and search anyone. So, when an officer leans in and acts as though the word cannabis is a skeleton key that opens you up to a search, their own rulebook disagrees with them. Now, I have to be scrupulously fair with you here, because I never want you walking away with half the picture. That's how people get into trouble. This does not mean the police can never search you where cannabis is involved. It means smell cannot be the only thing. If on top of a smell, there's something else, you're seen passing something hand to hand, there's intelligence about you, there's something in plain view, you're behaving in a way that genuinely adds to it, then those things combined can add up to lawful grounds. The police's own guidance even gives officers questions to ask themselves before they search. Can this smell actually be attributed to this particular person? How likely is it really that I'll find cannabis on them? Do I genuinely suspect it on a whole number one? Whose smell is it? Objective basis. So the rule isn't they can never search you for drugs. The rule is that a bare, standalone, I can smell weed with nothing else behind it is a search standing on very thin ice. The exact kind of search that gets found unlawful later. And there are two more holes in the bare smell search that you should understand, because they're exactly the weaknesses the guidance is worried about. The first is what the police themselves call attribution, a fancy word for a simple question. Whose smell is it? Think about it. You're in a car with 3 other people, or you're walking down a busy street past a doorway through a cloud someone else left behind. A smell of cannabis in the air does not have a name tag on it. It cannot by itself tell an officer that the drug is on you specifically, rather than on the person next to you or on someone who walked past 2 minutes ago or on a jacket you borrowed. That's precisely why the guidance tells officers to ask themselves whether the smell can actually be attributed to this particular person. Because very often, honestly, it can't. So, if you're one of 4 people in a car and the officer wants to search you because the car smells, that is a search on very shaky ground indeed. And the second hole is one that's grown much bigger in recent years. Not everything that smells, like hole number 2, legal CBD and hemp, smell the same. Cannabis is cannabis. We now live in a country full of perfectly legal products that smell almost identical. Legal hemp, CBD flower, CBD oils, and vapes. All sold openly on the high street, and all of which can smell exactly like the real thing to a human nose on a windy street. A nose cannot tell the difference between a legal CBD product and an illegal one. So, a smell alone doesn't even reliably tell an officer that a crime is in the picture at all. You are perfectly entitled to point that out calmly, that what they can smell may well be something entirely lawful. None of this means the smell is meaningless, but it means a smell standing alone is a thin and unreliable thing to strip search someone's dignity over. And now, you know why. So let's turn that knowledge into what you actually do, because this is the part that protects you. And the first thing I need you to understand is the hard rule that sits underneath everything. If a search is you can't refuse a lawful search, genuinely lawful, you cannot refuse it. You do not get to physically stop it. And if you try, that resisting can itself be an offense, and the officer is allowed to use reasonable force. So, I am never going to tell you to fight a search on the street. That only ever makes things worse. What I'm going to give you instead is far more powerful. The calm words that make the officer justify themselves, protect you from making it worse, and set you up to win afterwards if the search was wrong. So here is what you say and how you say it evenly, politely, no aggression. Because aggression is what they're hoping for. First, you make one thing clear. I don't say this, the exact words, consent to being searched. Now, that will not stop a lawful search, but it matters enormously because it means that if the only basis they had was a smell, you have not handed them permission to paper over it. You've made them rely on their power and their grounds out loud. Second, you ask the question that cuts straight to it. What are your grounds for the search beyond a smell? Say that calmly, and you have in one sentence shown them you know the rule. You're inviting them to state what else they've got. And if the honest answer is nothing, just the smell, you are now watching a search that their own guidance says shouldn't be happening. And every second of it is building your case. Third, you're entitled to be told certain things before they search you, and you should ask for them. The grounds, what they're actually looking for, the power they're using, the officer's name and station, and this is the big one, that you're entitled to a get the record plus don't self-incriminate. Written record of the search. Get that record. It is the single most valuable thing you can walk away with because it locks in their own words, exactly what grounds they claimed. And here's a mistake I need you to not make because it's the one that turns a search into a conviction. Do not start explaining yourself and do not answer their questions about it. When they say, have you been smoking? Whose is it? What have you got on you? You are under no obligation to answer. And answering is how people talk themselves straight into trouble. A nervous, well, I had a bit earlier, but is a gift to them. You can be completely polite and simply not get into it. I've got nothing to say about that. You don't owe them an explanation and the smell claim doesn't create one. And whatever you do, don't fall for the soft version. Do you mind if I just have a quick look? That's not a power, that's a request. And if you say yes, you've consented to the very search the law was making them justify. Don't hand it to them. So what happens if after all that, they search you anyway? You let them calmly, without resisting, hands visible, no drama. Because remember the golden rule of this whole area. You comply on the day, challenge after the day. And you challenge it afterwards. And here is why that's not weakness, it's strength. If that search was based only on a smell, with nothing else behind it, then you have just been searched on grounds that the police's own national guidance says weren't good enough. And that means if they found nothing, you have a genuine complaint about an unlawful search, and forces have been held to account for exactly this. And if somehow it went further, a search built on bad grounds is a search a good solicitor can challenge. Evidence from an unlawful search can be thrown out. But you only get to that if you kept calm, kept your mouth shut about the details, and walked away with the record. Not if you turned it into a shouting match and an obstruction charge. And let me make challenge it afterwards concrete, because people hear that and think it's vague or hopeless, and it isn't. Here's what it actually looks like. The moment the encounter is over and you're safe, write down everything while it's fresh. The time, the place, the officers' names or numbers, exactly what they said their grounds were, and crucially, whether they gave any reason beyond the smell. Keep that written record you asked for. You're entitled to it, and you can request a copy afterwards if you didn't get one on the spot. Then, if you believe the search was wrong, you have real routes. You can make a formal complaint how to actually challenge it to the force which they have to deal with. And if it's serious or they brush you off, it can go to the independent police watchdog. And if anything came of the search, if you were arrested or charged, you tell your solicitor straight away that the whole thing started on a bare smell, because that is exactly the kind of unlawful grounds argument that gets evidence excluded and cases thrown out. None of that is fantasy. Forces have apologized, paid out, and lost cases over searches that rested on nothing more than a sniff. But every one of those outcomes depends on you having stayed calm, kept the details to yourself, and walked away with the facts written down. Your dignity on the day is quiet compliance. Your power afterwards is the record. I want to say one more thing about why this matters so much beyond your own individual encounter. Because I think it's important, and I'll say it carefully. The smell-of-cannabis search has been criticized for years at the highest levels precisely because it's so easy to reach for and so hard to prove or disprove. Nobody can go back and check a smell. And because it has fallen very unevenly on certain communities, who get stopped far more than others, that's a big part of why the guidance tightened. So knowing this rule isn't just a party trick. It's you holding a power to its proper limits calmly in the moment. Which is exactly why this matters and who it is, what the law intends you to be able to do. And knowing precisely where those limits fall, when a search is lawful and when it isn't, the exact words to say, and how to challenge one that crossed the line, is the whole reason I put together a short, plain English guide to your rights in any police encounter in England and Wales. It's called the Know Your Rights Handbook, and it lays out calmly and without the jargon everything we've covered here. What a real drug search requires, why a smell alone isn't enough, the things an officer must tell you, and the right way to challenge a search that shouldn't have happened. I'm not going to give you a hard sell. If this video has been useful to you, the handbook is the whole thing in your pocket, and the link is in the description whenever you want it. So, let me bring it home, because I want this to stick. When an officer says, "I can smell cannabis," understand what you're actually hearing. A claim, not a magic word. And a claim that standing alone, their own rules say, is not enough. Remember this, plus subscribe. Remember the 4 things. 1. Stay calm and say clearly, "I don't consent to being searched." 2. Ask the question that shows you know the law. What are your grounds beyond the smell? 3. Don't explain yourself. Don't answer questions about it. And never agree to a quick look. And 4. If they search you anyway, let them. No resisting, but get the record and challenge it afterwards. Because a search built on a bare smell is exactly the search that doesn't survive being looked at properly. Comply on the day, win afterwards. Because here's the truth of it. In that moment, the officer is counting on you not knowing the rule. He's counting on the word cannabis doing all the work for him. The single most powerful thing you can do is stay calm and show him in one quiet sentence that you know a smell isn't enough. That changes the entire encounter. If this helped you, and I hope it genuinely did, do two things for me. Take a look at the pinned comment and the description where I've left those exact words so they're in your pocket before you ever need them. And subscribe, because every week I break down another one of these in plain English so that when it's you standing there, you already know your rights better than the person testing them. I'm Oliver Bennett. Know your rights, because the people who know them are the ones who walk away. I'll see you in the next.